Map rules may be annoying and a pain to follow, however they exist to ensure that all maps can properly work with the plugin/API and to enhance accessibility. So it's important that every single map that gets approved follows those rules. Before that though, maps ideally go through extensive testing and get checked by the map approval team as the final step. CS2KZ maps can contain an unlimited amount of courses, which are basically something with a start and an end zone. Most maps only have one. Courses can be classified as ranked or unranked depending on the mode. Ranked just means that the course respects all the rules and finishing it will give you points. For the sake of time and simplicity, this video will only cover single course ranked maps for the most part. To help you along your mapping journey, I would highly recommend downloading Zero's mapping tool installer. Quick and easy, you just have to download those 4 files at the very least to a folder on your desktop or something. To use it, run the setup first. This will install the most up-to-date plugin along with the mapping API, which I highly recommend, especially if you want to use fancier triggers like Seamless Teleport or NTB Hub. Then you can either launch Run Mapping, which will launch your workshop tools and give you the CS2KZ plugin in your workshop tools CS, or launch Run Listen, which will launch the game normally but allow you to run the plugin in practice mode and workshop maps. You can even play with your friends when you have the Listen server running. Just write status in your console and this will be your IP. Finally, before playing on Valve servers again, launch Verify, which resets your game back to normal. If this somehow does not work, you can verify the integrity of your game files instead. In CS2, buttons are no more. The player can only start and end their runs by touching zones. Those start and end zones need to be easy to find, which is why I would recommend using Game Chaos's zone demarcations or any form of visual for it. To create the zones, place an info target server only. Name it, check is course descriptor, name your course, and finally change the course number if you have more than one course. Then create a trigger multiple from a block and change the KZ trigger type to start zone. Then enter the course descriptor's name in course descriptor. For the end zone, make a copy of the start zone trigger and then change the KZ trigger type to end zone. Make sure to not have any rotation angle on any of your zones, otherwise an error message will show up in chat. If you touch a start zone at any point during your run, your timer will reset and you will lose your run. This is a very subjective thing, so you should do your best to place your start zone in a spot that is not easily accessible during a run, especially at the later stages. Things to consider for this include stuff like how far in the run you are, how hard the map is up until that point, and how easy it is to touch the start zone accidentally. The plugin uses this command to teleport a player to the start of a specific course. It makes it fast and it's super convenient. To make it, just create an info teleport destination, place it in front of your start zone, and define the name of your course descriptor in KZ course descriptor. If you have multiple courses, each one needs its own. I would recommend placing it facing your start zone. Algae room placement matters. In general, placing it near spawn or the start of the main course is the best. If a room is located deeper inside the map, you need to make sure it cannot be used as a skip. Algae rooms should have many things, including being easily findable, meaning the player should not have a hard time finding their way to it. In the case of teleports, it's a good idea to put it close to the spawn area, add a label and some kind of visual. This is done by creating an info teleport destination and simply naming it timer jumpstart area. This allows the plugin to TP the player directly to the entity by tapping !LJ in chat. Your algae room should contain these blocks at the very least. You are free to add smaller, larger, or blocks in between those distances. I've attached a prefab of my algae room in the description. Feel free to use and modify it as long as you give proper credit. Trivial, but the player should be able to tell which block they are using at a glance. Your blocks need to be properly sized to allow the player to easily use them. Blocks like these are no good, neither those or those. I'd recommend making your blocks between 32 to 48 units in height to prevent players from being able to run over the blocks without jumping, while also not being too high to a point where the player needs to crouch to get on them. Include an exit from your algae room. Whether it's a tunnel or teleport, it's important to have a way back for the players that don't know about the commands. This is subjective. However, the basics are to have combined light probes at the very least. These things tell the game how to light things that cannot or do not have pre-calculated lighting on them. A general rule of thumb is to place them in the center of rooms, not inside a block, and at player eye level. It's recommended to have the fade distance be half the amount by which the volumes overlap. For example, if the overlap is 32 units, the recommended fade is 16 units. The overlap is to prevent stuff like this and this from happening. Also, make sure that the map is not too dark where not intended, to make sure that the player can easily see where they're going, as well as removing things that could obstruct the view during a run, also if not intended. For visuals, if you want examples of what's considered low effort or good enough, this post can help you, even if it was made for CSGO. These naming requirements are mainly due to API limitations and to make our lives easier. If you want the details, here they are. Anyway, for number 4, the workshop map name needs to be exactly the same as the file name of the map. The workshop map name can be found on the workshop itself, and for the file name you can just load into it and then press tab. Pretty standard. Do not submit maps that were ported or modified without the permission of the original mapper. The proof needs to be posted along with your map submission. If the mapper cannot be reached through reasonable attempts or has been inactive for more than 2 years, you can submit the port anyway. It's also recommended to add the original mapper as contributor in your workshop page. Ports must make use of the current engine lighting and features if possible. They also need to follow the current rules. For example, the port has to have core support, algae support, and an algae room if it doesn't already have it. This includes any form of racism and other things like that, whether they are hidden or not. For ads, it will be looked at case by case by the map team. However, gambling will probably not be allowed. If obscene content is found after the map is approved, it will probably result in a deglobal and a mapper ban. Your map should be playable at reasonable frame rates and ideally should not be big in file size. File size will of course be affected by the materials used and the quality of your map. For example, if your map looks like this and is like 400 megabytes, there might be something wrong. Maybe there's extra stuff like other maps being packed along with your map, or some materials resolution are way too high. Your map can be optimized in multiple ways, such as light map, visibility, and file size. For light map, deleting faces that cannot be seen and using light map player spaces is the best. This also slightly decreases file size as less light map data is stored. For visibility, it is recommended to break line of sight of the player so that they cannot see a lot of the map from a single spot. This is especially applicable to bigger maps where rendering a huge portion of it could tank the frame rate by a lot. If you want more details, I linked a video in the description. Even unused custom materials get submitted along your workshop map. so you must make sure to remove as much as possible before that. A simple way of doing it is closing Hammer, going to this folder, then deleting materials, models, particles, and sounds before opening Hammer again and compiling. Then you can just submit on the workshop as usual, and that should completely remove all the unused materials. Before your map gets approved, it has to be proven to be doable by a human without the use of any external assistance on the mode that you designed it for. This concerns only hard maps like 99% of the time. As far as I know, this rule was implemented around the time of KZ Ambition, which had many jumps that were not proven feasible at the time for over a year, until it was later nerfed and then done. Usually, having a replay of a legit full run is all that's needed. Your map should ideally be intuitive. This means that if a player thinks that they can do something, they probably should be able to. This is mostly done by placing visual cues like a fence, a little sign, or water. In the case of playerclips, they are basically invisible blocks. Avoid placing them in ways that can be confusing to the player. The best way is to add some kind of visual to them, be it a fence or anything that could indicate that there's a player clip here. Similar to player clips, triggers are also invisible. Avoid placing them without visual cues and make them easy to distinguish between different types. Triggers need special care since they can be used to exploit and break your map. Make sure to test them. In this instance, there was a big multi-B-hub trigger from the last part of the map that extended to the very bottom, where I was able to touch it while being on a standable surface, resulting in me being able to skip like 90% of the map. In the case of the key system, the player will keep the keys unless they are removed from them by using another trigger. This can allow a player to exploit the map and break it. For example, in a KZ map, it is best to remove the keys at the start of the map, as the player cannot start their timer unless they get to some specific parts, where you can place triggers to remove the keys. For moving blocks, I would recommend totally avoiding them if they are part of gameplay, because modern KZ maps have very little moving parts to them, as they can make a run RNG or allow for griefing. Same thing for non-solid blocks. Avoid using them in ways that can be confusing because they look just like regular blocks. Your map should not contain anything that a player can do to make their run better prior to starting it, or require a second player to complete or make things easier. In this case, this map had triggers with some kind of activation cooldown. This resulted in players abusing it by making a second player activate the trigger just before the other would land on it, causing them not to get teleported. This is another example, but this time a bonus made to play like this. This would never pass if this were to be a ranked course. I highly recommend having these things, however, they are not required as per the rules. This includes a thumbnail, showcase pictures, and a good description that mentions the CS2KZ.org website. If we want new players, we gotta make it as easy as possible to connect to the servers. Additionally, some maps can only work with the mapping API, which requires the plugin to work. This can direct players to the website where they can find other servers, track their map running progress, discover KZ communities, and find help. Self-explanatory, it makes it easier to know where you're going. Block Legends gave the player an idea of what to expect ahead. Bonus points if you make them functional. Not all players know about no-clip or restart commands. Therefore, having teleports close by the end of the map and in the LG room makes your map easier to navigate. Just be mindful of their placement so as to avoid teleporting players by accident, especially if they are in a course. All that said, remember that this is your map. Even though you're limited in what you can do, try working with the rules so that we all benefit from competitive yet cool KZ maps. I think that mappers should design their maps with the player in mind, just like people make products tailored to their customers. In other words, make them accessible and pleasant while remembering that it's a KZ map where players run from point A to point B as fast as possible. Remember that players of all skill level and knowledge levels will play it, and that as a mapper you have a bias. What you think might be easy and obvious might be tricky and obscure by others. Making a map takes time, so take your time and ask for feedback. Submit your map for testing and make changes. Many people are ready to help, so use that to your advantage. The current best place to discuss KZ mapping is the KZ Mapping Discord, link in the description.
I'll stop.